Family Policy Alliance. My name is Joseph Kohm. I'm the Director of Public Policy at FPA. With me on the show this morning is FPA's Vice President for Strategy, Autumn Stroop. Autumn, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Good to be with you and good to be with everybody here this morning.
Great to be here with you as well. Today, we're going to talk about some abortion myths and we're going to bust them wide open. I think this is a really timely subject these days because last week we had the annual March for Life that some members of our staff were able to attend, including me. And it was cold, it was snowy, and we're going to talk more about that experience, but it really highlights a lot that has changed in the abortion policy and cultural environment in the wake of the Dobbs decision, which we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of. And these days, many strong pro-life supporters receive pushback on their beliefs about life, and pro-abortion forces love to spread misinformation. It's about this issue. We saw as soon as Dobbs came down, the information warfare phase of the fight to protect the unborn life began from the very top of our government and media structures all the way down. And we want to make sure that we bust some of those myths today and in the future. And we're going to start with the very first one that has been around since the original Roe versus Wade decision promulgated by the Supreme Court. When Dobbs came down, the immediate message was about restoring abortion rights, quote unquote. And so we're going to start there. The myth that abortion is a constitutional right specifically. Roe versus Wade put that forward, and Dobbs said that was not true. So the left has made that, and the pro-choice movement has made that a mantra for 50 years. So Autumn, just tell us right up front, is abortion a constitutional right?
Absolutely not, Joseph. That's a great myth to start with. It never has been, and thankfully, now that the Dobbs case has gone forward, it never will be. We're confident of that because the court, as you know, Joseph, originally in Roe versus Wade, they had to sort of invent a right to abortion because it just simply doesn't exist in the Constitution. And if you read the actual words of the case, they use a funny word. They say the penumbras. They say that the right to abortion is found in the penumbras of the Constitution, whatever those may be. But the basic meaning is that it was lurking in the shadows somewhere, and we just didn't realize it until 1973. So they basically made it up and said that there was a right to an abortion before a baby in the womb is viable. Now, of course, in addition to harming millions of women and taking the lives of over 60 million children since then, the other harm there was done to the Constitution itself by saying it contained this invented right and that we could just make up things in the Constitution that don't exist. And it caused a lot of problems, but also it showed too that that made up right had a lot of flaws, obviously, in it, because the point at which a baby can survive outside the mother's womb, that point of viability with modern technology and all of the blessings that we have as a country and as a society, that point has gotten earlier and earlier in gestation, thankfully. So it was never a good, solid hook to hang a hat on, legally speaking, in that case. So you're right, Joseph. Thankfully, when the Dobbs case came down and said that the court got it wrong, they were right. The court got it wrong. There was never a constitutional right to abortion.
That's absolutely right, Autumn. I actually, to make sure I got everything right for my research for this podcast, I went back and looked at the original opinion by Justice Blackmun in that court. Even before then, I can remember in my education, before I went to law school, my parents, who are also attorneys, sitting me down and explaining to me what abortion was and how the court had supposedly found a right to it. And they told me then what I tell people now, which is I do a word search in a document for the Constitution of the United States, and you will not find the word abortion in it. I guarantee it. And for us originalists in the crowd, that makes enough sense. But surely there's other ways to read it into the Constitution, right? And the answer is, of course, wrong, as you just said. And I want to highlight just one other portion of the opinion itself. Justice Blackmun at that time wrote that the court doesn't need to define when life begins, which is quite a clear cop-out in my mind. I think everyone has a pretty good idea of when life begins. At the very latest, it's at a heartbeat, and we believe it's is immediately upon fertilization and conception. So the court pitted mothers against babies effectively in this opinion by saying that a mother has achieved something called something akin to full personhood, and the baby has not, and so the baby does not have as many rights as the mother. And I find that to be deeply cynical, Autumn, that the court would pit a mother and against her own baby, and vice versa. And that's just not how God created the family. And I think that's really sad that that's the direction the original court in Roe took.
That's exactly right, Joseph. It's a really dark and sinister ruling. I mean, we joke about them saying that that right was found in the penumbras and all sorts of things because it is that is a little bit funny that they had to make it up, but the impact, of course, and what it meant was really, really dark and dangerous, and of course, hurt, like we said, many millions of women, cost 60 million plus Americans their lives. And you're right. Beyond that, it harmed the Constitution. And this isn't the first time we've seen something like that either, where we've sort of declassified fellow humans as something short of a full person. We've seen that with African Americans. We've seen that in other places. So it's a really dark and sinister thing, and we're glad that the Dobbs Court saw through that and wronged that decades old, or righted that decades old wrong. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. That was one of the most important and consequential decisions in really all of Western jurisprudential history, which is just a fancy way to say Western legal history. Is the Dobbs v. Jackson women's health case is one of the greatest and best and most important decisions the Supreme Court or any court has ever issued. It corrected that wrong, and it paved the way for legislators at every level, state and federal, to take action to protect unborn life. So bottom line, busting this myth to round it out, is that the original court got this wrong. There is no constitutional right to an abortion, and the Dobbs court got it right. But moving on from that, because that right was, or that supposed right was taken away in the Dobbs decision, like I said, the information warfare phase of this fight began. And the left and the pro-choice movement immediately switched to promulgating what's called chemical abortion, or a drug regimen to end a pregnancy after conception. And it's quite clear that's going to become the main method that the pro-abortion movement is going to use to spread abortion and to provide abortion to vulnerable mothers and pregnant young women. And we want to bust one of those myths here. One part of the information warfare that the pro-abortion side always says is that chemical abortion drugs is totally safe. It's the safest thing you can do from a medical perspective. So, Autumn, I want to ask you again, straight up: is chemical abortion safe?
Absolutely not. I'm so glad we're talking about this, Joseph. It's a terrible, terrible lie that the left is peddling around right now. And again, comes at the cost of life. Yes, unborn life, but also the lives of women too. In fact, chemical abortion is 4 times riskier than that of surgical abortion, which already carries its own baggage of risks. But chemical abortion, the left likes to sell it as you take a pill, you pop it, you are able to have a quick and easy abortion, get rid of the problem at home yourself. And it's completely safe, just like taking a Tylenol. Well, no, of course it's not. It can come with a lot of risks: heavy bleeding, passing your unborn child at home, and you're in your home, a place that's supposed to be safe. Heavy risk of hemorrhaging. Again, it's 4 times riskier than surgical abortions. Our friends at Charlotte Lozier have done a lot of research on this. Um, and so it's not safe. In fact, you're 50% more likely to end up in the ER after taking a chemical abortion pill than you are going through a surgical abortion procedure. So very, very high risk. And one thing I like to point out, Joseph, always when talking about chemical abortion, is that it makes it a lot easier on the abortion industry. They have little to no cost other than providing the pills for this. And they get to sit at home and rake in the profits, while all the risk and all the responsibility goes squarely on the woman for when she takes the abortion pills. She has to go to the hospital. She has to figure out her own medical care. She may or may not even be seen by an actual provider. And there's likely no one there to sue if something goes wrong, or if she's given incorrect medical advice, or if any, when she takes the pill, because she's often, like I said, not seen by a provider. And therefore, she's not diagnosed if she has an ectopic pregnancy, or if she's measuring Rh negative in her blood, which can cause complications with future pregnancies or inability to get pregnant. So again, all of the risk, all of the responsibility falls squarely on the woman, and the abortion industry just gets to sit back and rake in the profit. So of course they're peddling this as a good solution for birth control, when really it's a very serious and risky thing for a woman to do, to take an abortion pill.
Indeed, Autumn. It's just it's so important and critical for people to know that. And I just find it very fascinating that in the last few years the world has given an increased focus, or at least debate, around the entire concept of misinformation. And this information battle that we're waging is really important because people need to know this. And women are going to be hurt and traumatized if they don't understand it. And I think of great examples of promulgating the truth about this. And films like Unplanned, based on Abby Johnson's life, has a scene showing the results of chemical abortion, and it's very realistic, and that's really important. But it's very hard to watch at the same time for all the reasons you just described. It's horrifying, the results of the chemical abortion pill regimen, and that's why this effort to speak the truth is so important. And we know our audience is really concerned about this and interested in this subject particularly. So I want to highlight that FPA has done a video with our friends at the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists, also called APLOG for the moniker. And we've done a video with them on chemical abortions, and you can find that right now using the link in the description to this podcast. I really want to encourage our guests and our viewers and listeners to go watch that video to learn more on this subject and why it's so important. So thank you, Autumn, for helping me bust that myth. I have one more. We're going to transition to a little bit of a happier subject, and this is about we introduced the show talking about the annual March for Life, which is been going on for over 50 years. And Autumn and I, you've both attended marches for life, as they would say. I attended recently as last week, along with several other FPA staff members. So the myth I want to bust about this is that the media tells us that tens of thousands of people show up, when in reality, Autumn, how many people actually show up to the March for Life every year?
A lot more than that, Joseph. I'll let you speak to the real numbers since you were there, but it's a lot more than that. The media likes to downplay it, but this is for sure one of the greatest human rights marches that there has ever been. And major kudos to our friends at March for Life for the huge amount of work that this takes to put on an event of that nature, the logistics and the security and all of that goes into it. But it is an incredible experience with a good, diverse community, all standing for the right to life. It's men, it's women, it's of all ethnic backgrounds, religious backgrounds, all different ages. You've got moms out there with young babies. You've got folks who have been marching for decades out there. So it's a really wonderful experience. And I think, one of the things that is also good to point out, and also where some of you who are watching this may have participated, if you can't make it to the annual march in DC every January, is many have participated in state marches as well. And again, there's thousands of people who show up at state capitals to March for Life too. So it is the big March for Life in DC, many people there, but also the state marches too. So people across the country just showing up in droves to stand for life. It's incredible. If you've never done a state march or the March in DC, I would definitely encourage you to participate. It's a truly wonderful experience, and just that opportunity to march for those who can't march for themselves is incredible.
It really is. It's an honor. Autumn, I thought you and I, having both been to marches for life within the past 20 years, might just share some reflections on attending and being a part of the march with our audience. And I'm happy to start with that, since I went to the one last week. That was I believe, my fifth March for Life I'm up to now. And some of those years I was otherwise engaged or not able to go. So, but again, it's an honor for the reasons you said. I encourage our audiences to attend ideally both the National March and their state March for Life, because as a pro-life person with strong convictions about the value of unborn life, that can be a lonely position to hold, or it can feel that way at least. I often feel lonely in that position when I defend it to others, even people I care about. And going to the March for Life is such an encouragement because of the diversity there. both in skin color and nationality, but also in age. It's so encouraging to see the young people that show up to the march every year to speak up for those that cannot speak for themselves, and to defend vulnerable women and advocate for protections and provision for them. It's so powerful. And this year it was a snowy day in Washington, as they say. There was about a foot of snow on the ground. It had been snowing all night, and it continued through the day. And it wasn't terribly cold. It hovered right around 35, 33 degrees. But seeing the snow fall throughout the day as we celebrated the successes of the past and look forward to the challenges of the future, it was an honor that God chose everyone there, over 100,000 people, in that moment. The Bible says we were born for such a time as this. And to think that God selected us out of all of history to be the ones to defend his most vulnerable image bearers in 2024, the United States of America, is humbling. And I mentioned young people earlier. I have to give a shout out to the March for how well they do in facilitating involvement of young people in this advocacy. When I was in law school, I led my university's Students for Life group. And at the time, the group was defunct, and I resurrected it. And then this year, it was so good to see that they had been selected as one of the universities to lead the march at the very front, carrying the March for Life banner. That is the kind of impact that young people can have in standing for unborn life. And that should be an encouragement to our entire audience of any age group. And finally, I'll just say briefly, I was also able to attend the Virginia State first March for Life ever. Me and several members of the FPA staff who live on the East Coast were able to go. And obviously, the state marches are a little bit smaller of a crowd, but they're just as important because they make your voice heard at the state level, which is where so much of the battle for unborn life is being fought right now. You're in the middle of legislative sessions for this spring, and unborn life is on the docket in almost all 50 states. So I just encourage you, get in touch with your state march, attend that, and get tied in also to your state family policy council. You can find a link to every one of those in the description of this podcast. Those are our state-based family policy councils who do the same work that FPA does, but their state-specific level, and everyone works on the life issue. So we encourage you to connect with them and stand for unborn life. So those are my strongest reflections on having attended marches over the years, Autumn. And I just wanted to ask you for yours as well.
As you were speaking, Joseph, I was thinking about the marches I've attended over the years as well. And I think the biggest thing that stood out to me is how hopeful and positive and happy the tenor and the mood of the crowd is, whether it's at a state level march or in DC. It's just a bunch of really happy, really motivated people who are excited to be there. Like you said, there's a good sense of camaraderie, a lot of diversity in the crowd. But the cause for life bonds us all together. And it really is a really happy experience where if you've observed other marches, I know there's women's marches, which is more centered around a pro-abortion viewpoint, or certainly some of the LGBT marches and events that have happened, and many others as well. It's more of an angry type of crowd or a chip on your shoulder type of crowd. Whereas this one, the March for Life, is just so positive and hope filled as we stand for life. So that was one of my main takeaways, that it's always been such a wonderful and uplifting experience. So definitely encourage all of you to be a part of that at the state level, and hopefully someday in DC as well.
I couldn't agree more, Autumn. It's such a contrast from so much modern, public advocacy, I'll say. And it's one of those events that fills your soul and encourages it while you're there, rather than draining you. It gives you hope and assurance that one day our Heavenly Father is going to make everything right. He's going to right all wrongs. Well, Autumn, I grew up watching the show Mythbusters. I feel like we just brought it back for this show, but it's been a blast busting these three myths with you. But I want our audience to know that there are many, many other myths about the issue of life and abortion out there, and we want to encourage you to seek them. We're going to help by continuing to bust myths here at Family Policy Alliance and equip you with the tools you need to speak the truth. So that's what we do here at Family Policy Alliance. We're going to continue to do that. We encourage you to join us in that fight. We thank you for listening to this episode of Abortion Myth Busting at the SoCon Report podcast. Again, my name is Joseph Kohm. I've been here with Autumn Leva. We will see you next time on the SoCon Report podcast.